So today we're just taking a quick look at how to plot points in the coordinate plane, because you'll need to be able to do this for the next learning target. So I want to take a little bit of time to not only review plotting points, but to help you with how to set up graphs for this class. So when they talk about the coordinate plane, it says it's two perpendicular number lines called axes. Now the singular is axis. So we have the x-axis, the y-axis. The plural then, together they are axes. Now, when you're looking at an ordered pair, it's like the point 2, -3. It has parentheses around it, and it has a comma, and the first variable is your x, and the second one is your y. This is important because most of what we're doing, it's going to be alphabetical order. Now, if it's a word problem and we define variables differently, that alphabetical order thing doesn't always hold true. So, every graph you ever do for this class, you will be held to these standards. You need to use a straight edge for all of your lines, and your x-axis and your y-axis are lines. And when I say straight edge, often a ruler is good for that. But if your ruler has chips in it, if it's an old ruler and it's not straight anymore, it is no longer a straight edge, and you need to get one that's actually straight. Your scale, if possible, should go by ones, and it's almost always possible to do that on just the ones that we do on paper that aren't word problems. The word problems, we're going to have to change the scale, though. You have to label the scale on each axis. If it's a word problem, we also have to label what the scale stands for, what those numbers stand for. Draw arrows at the ends of all of your lines, including your axes. If you don't draw the arrows, they're segments, and we are not using segments the vast majority of the time this year. And then, of course, for word problems, label your axes with the appropriate units. In this case, though, for this learning target, it's just practicing plotting points in the correct location on the graph. So I need to graph all 5 of these points and then label them A through E out to the side. Well, I have to set my axes on this graph. Do not do what I'm going to do right now. The only reason I'm going to do it is because it's a temptation for people to do this, and then they get themselves in trouble. So immediately I have students who go in and they put the x-axis right in the middle. They put the y-axis pretty much right in the middle. So their origin, that 0, 0 point, is right in the middle of their graph. The problem is that a lot of graphs now, maybe everything that's interesting in this graph is happening up here. And maybe even off the graph on this side. I can't fit all of that on my graph. Maybe even off the graph on the top. If everything interesting is happening here, what I needed to do with those axes was maybe put this one down so that I can pull those things that are up off the graph down into the graph. And maybe this axis needed to go to the left. Notice my origin is not quite on the edge of the graph, but it's actually pretty far down in this case. So do not just center your origin. Stop and think about what you're doing and what you need for that, and then graph accordingly. So let me erase all of these things and start fresh. I'm going to think about first, and this won't let me erase this right now or delete it, so I'm just going to move them around as needed. I'm going to think about my x-axis. Now my x-axis goes across. I need to put my x-axis so that I have enough room above and below it to get all of these y values in here. So I see -2, 4, 5, -3, 0. I need to go down to -3 and up to +5. That means I couldn't put this axis here because I would only be able to get up to +4. So I'm going to move it down. This is actually not a bad location. I can easily get up to +5, and it doesn't have to be the top value. A lot of times I don't like to put those on the edge of my graph. And I can easily get down to -3. Now, my y-axis, I need to be able to move to the left of it far enough to get to -4, and to the right of it far enough to get to +5. So I'm going to offset it just a little bit here to the left. I can easily now get to -4 and to +5. Notice on these axes there are arrows at the ends because these are lines. They need to have arrows. Now, I need to get, I said, to positive 5 is the largest positive x value. So now I need to label my scale there. The labels, the numbers, go directly on the grid line. 1 goes right on the first grid line because this point is the origin. It's actually the point 0, 0. So if this is 0, this is 1, 2, 3. Again, labeling directly on the grid line, not just between the two grid lines, 4 and 5. For my negative x values, I had to get as far left as negative 4. So negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, and negative 4. For my y's, I had to go down to negative 3. So negative 1, negative 2, and negative 3. And then as far up as positive 5, it looks like. So 1, 2, again, right on the grid lines. 3, 4, and 5. And it's possible to fit this graph going by ones, so I went by ones. Now I'm going to change the color because with this big, really thick black x and y axes, it's kind of hard sometimes to see any dots on top of them. So now I'm going to plot my points. A is the point where x is positive 5 and y is negative 2. So I start at the origin. I go over to where x, remember x goes across, x is positive 5, and now I'm either going to go up or down based on my y. Y is negative 2, so I go down to negative 2. And I'm going to label that point A because it says label each point with its letter name. And then y's rise, just as a reminder. So B is the point where x is negative 3 and y is positive 4. So x is negative 3 means I go to the left 3. And then I go up or down based on my y. My y is positive 4, so I'm going to go up to positive 4. Let me erase this part on the axis that I accidentally marked on. And now I'm going to go back and label this point B. Notice the B is not the point. There is a point here, and the label B is off to the side of it. C is the point where x is 0 and y is 5. So if x is 0, it means I don't move to the left or right at all. I stay right here. But then y is 5, so I move up 5. That is point C. D is the point negative 4, negative 3. So x is negative 4, I move to the left 4. Y is negative 3, so then I move down 3. That's the point D, which I label. And E is the point 0, 0, which means I'm not moving left or right or up or down. I stay right on the origin, and that's the point E. So that would be what you're going to do for these problems. Reminders, you need to use a straight edge on your x and y axes. You need to put arrows at the ends of your axes because they are lines. You need to label your scale out as far as you need it. I didn't have to go out to 6 or 7 on my positive x because my positive x values only went to 5. Label your scale going by ones as far as you need to go to make sure that every point is covered, and then plot your points and put your labels out to the side. Thank you.